Okay, starting up again. Okay, so yeah, he needed somebody special because the Israelites were in slavery and they didn't have time to go off and study. I mean, Egypt was death. It was destroying Israel. He was throwing the babies in the river and killing them. Okay, so remember, Egypt, death, and then he says, I'm going to bring you up out of Egypt. Okay. And can somebody locate the verse that has the 3-day bit in it for me?
That might be one
of them.
chapter 3.
18.
Verse 18. So actually, we're almost there, right? What verse are we on next here?
We're on 15.
We read 15. Okay, who wants to read verse 16? Shoshana?
Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I am indeed concerned about you and what has been done to you in Egypt.
Okay, so he's going to tell them to say the same thing to the Israelites. Yahweh, Elohai, Avotechem, Nirah, Alai, he's appeared to me. Elohai, Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov. Okay, and I am attending, I am attending. Okay, that's another double verb there. Pakod, pakadti, all right, at him. Okay, and he's seen what they make them do, their servitude. All right, verse 17, Miriam.
So I said, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanite and the Hittite and the Amorite and the Parasite and the Hivite and the Jebusite to a land flowing with milk and honey.
El Eretz, Ha-Kanaani, Veha-Hiti, Veha-Emori, Veha-Perizi, okay, lost my place. I gotta find it again. Okay, here. Veha-Hivi, Veha-Yebusi, El Eretz, Zavat, flowing, okay. Chalab. What's chalab? You know what chalab is?
Milk.
Milk, right.
I learned that in Hebrew.
Udvash, okay, and honey.
The missing one are the Girgashites.
Oh, so you found the seventh nation?
Yeah, in
Now,
Deuteronomy.
that's in Deuteronomy, but it's not in here.
Right.
Okay. So I wonder why it's 6 nations here and 7 nations there.
Better investigate it.
Well, yeah, that's something worth investigating at some point. Okay, verse 18 going up here.
Oops.
Okay. Marjorie, would you like to read verse 18, please?
The elders of Israel will listen to you. Then you and the elders are to go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Let us take a 3-day journey into the desert to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God.
Okay. Vashema'u v'kolcha uvata ata v'ziknei Yisrael el melech Mitzrayim ve'amartem elai Yahweh Elohai ha'ivrim nikra aleinu. It's appeared to us, or upon us. Ve'ata nelacha na, I pray. So they're beseeching him. This is like, they're being nice to Pharaoh. They're saying, they're entreating him. Okay?
Imagine what would
The
happen
word
that
na,
way if you said
okay.
we'd cut your head off otherwise.
Right. Na. Derech shaloshet yamin. Okay? A way of 3 days.
I want you to get a response.
Road of 3 days, or a journey of 3 days. Now there's something that they're not telling Pharaoh here. Okay? Mount Sinai is how far from Egypt?
I don't know, hundreds of miles.
How many days would it take, more or less than 3 days to get there?
I have no idea.
A lot longer than 3 days.
Yeah, okay.
Plus it's through the Red Sea.
A week?
Okay, so I'll erase something here. Okay, so this is a place called the Wilderness of Sinai. Okay, so here is the Red Sea going like that. Gulf of Aqaba going like that. Yam Suf, or the End Sea, okay, where Pharaoh meets his end. Okay, this is Midian, and here's Mount Sinai over here. Okay, the Wilderness of Sinai is a wilderness that surrounds the mountain, and actually it's the wilderness on this side of the mountain. Okay, this over here, what would this be? The wilderness of, oh, I can't remember what it is, Sin? Okay.
Something like that.
Okay, when they cross the Red Sea here, then they come on this mountain side of the mountain, they come up to the split rock, called Rephidim, okay, and they have their little battle with the Amalekites. The Amalek tries to kill them. Okay, this is where Moses held up his hands. All right. Okay, the 3 days is how long it takes to go from that side of the mountain to that side of the mountain in the wilderness of Sinai here. Okay, but think typology here and hint. It's being presented to Pharaoh as going from Egypt to Sinai.
Well, it says 3 days into the wilderness.
Right, into the wilderness. He didn't say which one, did he?
No.
But this still
Somebody
gives us a
being
clue.
lawyerly.
Okay, because Egypt is what? Represents what?
Yeah.
Death. And Mount Sinai represents what?
Like
Life. And how long does it take them to get from death to life?
3 days.
3 days. Wonder where we've heard of that before. Anybody want to explain where we heard of that before?
Everywhere? Everywhere?
Everywhere. Right, the scriptures are full of it. Okay, so
Crucifixion and the resurrection.
exactly. Okay, so Yeshua died, and then 3 days later he comes back to life. Okay, now they go up to Mount Sinai here. He brings them up out of the land, using this verb root, Allah. Okay, and they're going to worship him on that mountain, and God calls it what?
Sinai?
A sign. Otot.
I didn't say a sign.
Oat. Okay, I said signs to you, okay. An
Why
oat.
is it called Mount
Ha-oat.
Sinai?
Okay, in this text it's
Is
ha-oat.
it Sinai
A sign.
Peninsula?
Alright. So the sign, well, where does Yeshua talk about a sign?
Sign of Jonah.
Sign of Jonah is the only sign that will be given to Israel. Okay? But it's not just a sign that's found in one place. It's cryptic. It's a sign that's found everywhere.
Three's the magic
Just about every
number,
time
after
the
all.
number 3 comes up, and you can pin
Now we
a
know
type
why
of
3 is
death
the
and a
magic
type of
number.
deliverance at the end of the 3. Then we have the sign of Jonah. Okay? Alright. Valerie, can you read the rest of the chapter?
But I know that the king of Egypt will not permit you to go except under compulsion. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all my miracles, which I shall do in the midst of it. And after that he will let you go. I will grant this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and it shall be that when you go, you will not go empty-handed. But every woman shall ask of her neighbor and the woman who lives in her house articles of silver and articles of gold and clothing, and you will put them on your sons and daughters. Thus you will plunder the Egyptians.
Okay, I guess I want to comment on just this word.
Egypt level.
That was verse 22 at the end, right?
Why is it
You will plunder the Egyptians. Okay. Banitzal town. Okay. Now, God talks about delivering Israel beforehand in the passage.
plunder them?
Same word, okay? This is important, the same word. Okay. He's going to deliver the Egyptians from their goods.
Plunder them.
Okay. Plunder them.
Liberate them.
Oh, and apparently the Israelites had some sojourners in their house, because it says here,
How do you know it didn't mean the owner of the house?
Sha'ala Isha Mish Ken Ta Umi Garat. Umigarat. That's from the Hebrew word ger, which means sojourner. Okay, and it says Beita in her house. Each woman shall ask from her neighbor and
The sojourner.
from the sojourner in her house. Okay, now there was a mixed multitude that went up with Israel, right? Okay, so some of them were these sojourners in the house. Okay,
Were these just particularly women who live in her house? It says.
right. That doesn't mean that all of the sojourners that were in their house went up. Probably most of them preferred to stay in Egypt. And they just lost their employment or whatever. Okay.
But they were slaves, most of them.
Well, probably this is what happened. This is a societal structure that devolved. The men were made slaves. Okay, because remember the Egyptians were afraid of what? The male babies and the men becoming too great. So they put them into servitude so they wouldn't have time to do anything else but serve. But they couldn't make
Organize
slaves out of
rebellion.
everybody because then
Who would feed the men?
who would feed this? Right, exactly. So the women probably had to do the business, the work, the house care, everything. Well, the men were off in slavery, and they probably got to rotate back home. Some
You're
kind of
not
system
using
like
it.
that. Okay, so anyway, that's how things went.
And the Egyptians probably really owed them all that plunder.
Oh yeah,
That's
they
true.
did,
Yeah,
and
they
not
just-
only that, but you know that the Muslims complain that Israel owes it back to them, back to Egypt, all the gold that they plundered. Even to this day.
Ha! You're not getting
But
it.
actually, for being in slavery, probably they were actually slaves for about 2 generations. Okay,
Probably no could have taken
they were
all the
only in
plunder
Egypt for
beforehand.
210 years. Okay,
They
and
were-
slavery came after Joseph died.
And how did that other king get on the throne again?
Well,
there-
Joseph was during the 13th dynasty. Okay, and if you look at the 13th dynasty, the king's rules were very, very short.
Why were they so
4 or
short?
5, probably because their system was a little more democratic.
Oh.
But you can have a democracy that doesn't stop oppression, though. I mean, we had a democracy, and the slaves in the South were oppressed. So we had a president every 4 years. But black people were in, we have to say, what's the key word for now? We have to say African American now, okay? They were held in servitude by the South, the Southerners. So that shows that just because you have a democracy in your country doesn't mean that part of the population can't be held in servitude. So these 13th dynasty kings were very short-ruled. And possibly the reason for that was through the influence of Joseph.
Wasn't there some kind of rebellion or something in the pharaoh thing
Well,
that switched pharaohs from a
yeah,
pharaoh?
Pharaoh arose after Joseph died that didn't know Joseph. And then they started to oppress Israel. Okay.
I thought you explained how that happened, though.
How what happened?
How a different pharaoh that didn't know him came up.
Well, you have to read the text. Joseph died and then didn't know. Okay, well, that doesn't mean not know about.
Well, yeah.
It means he didn't recognize him. He didn't acknowledge him. The word know has more meanings in the ancient language than it has in English. Okay? Alright.
But
I'm ready to quit unless you have more questions.
no mention is made of Moses in the history of Egypt either.
Right.
Evidently.
Right, but that seems to be generally true with any nation Israel gets involved with. I mean,
Is it some kind of...
well, Assyrian, I
Prejudice
suppose there's
here?
traces. Actually, there are Hebrew names that pop up in archaeology and stuff. But no, the main history, actually the history of everything in Egypt is kind of legendary. I mean, it's not straightforward history. It's nothing like the history of the Neo-Babylonian Empire or the Roman Empire. History gets more and, well, I mean, okay, here's the degrees of history. You can go, Roman history is well documented, well written out. Okay, Greek history less so. Babylonian history, we know that from archaeology. But then it takes another step down in fuzziness with Assyrian history, and then, yeah, another step down in fuzziness with Egyptian history. So, with the Bible history is the accurate, in the scripture, detailed, accurate. Everything we do know about archaeology does confirm what the scriptures say, or the scripture confirms it. So, the history of the scripture is unlike it. Human history devolves over time. And the only reason that biblical history is known so precisely is because God had a helping hand in preserving it. The point I'm making is that sin would cause people to forget. The truth of the past would just fade away, become fuzzy. Because of the sin nature. Because of evil. But
Because your neurons are dying.
well, yeah, people are dying too. An example of getting old, your memories fade, okay? But that happens on a historical level too. Now, the reason we have the scripture and we have the reverse of that in the scripture, the reverse. In other words,
getting confused.
the reason that scripture is accurate, preserved, remembered history, and it's not seemingly subject to the law of entropy and death is because God has preserved it. He steps in to deliver Israel when Israel gets in a big fix, like in Egypt. I'm done unless you have more questions.
Dad, that's how
I don't have any other questions.
Push
What
the
do you
button.
have?
push the button.
Push the button. End it.